Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and to all of my students. Welcome to the second model of the third week lecture. Um, we have reviewed how the political, economic, and legal systems of countries can vary over the first model of the lecture. And one of the things that I have emphasized is that the potential benefits, costs, and risks of doing business. And when we think about this in a manner of principles of management and the next generation contents, the risks of doing business in a country are a function of its political, economic, and legal systems. Um, Let us just briefly think about what we have dealt with in the past session. We've talked about political systems, which can be assessed according to two dimensions, right? And the degree to which they emphasize collectivism as opposed to individualism. That was the first pillar. And the second one was the degree to which they are democratic or totalitarian. And I have reinforced an idea that collectivism is an ideology that views the needs of society as being more important than the needs of the individual. Collectivism translates into an advocacy for state intervention in economic activities, and in the case of communism, a totalitarian dictatorship. Also, we have discussed individualism, an ideology that is built on an emphasis of the primacy of an individual's freedoms in the political, economic, and cultural realm. Individualism translates into an advocacy for democratic ideals and free market economics, right? So these two spectrum of democracy and totalitarianism are at different ends of the political spectrum. In a representative democracy, citizens periodically elect individuals to represent them, and political freedoms are guaranteed by a constitution. And in a totalitarian state, political power is monopolized by a party or group or individual, and basic political freedoms are denied to citizens of the state. So, for examples, I have given you, at the end, some cases of United States representing individualism, and also North Korea and China going toward more of a totalitarian collectivist cultural scenes that has been opposing to represent the national differences in political economy, right? And it should be clear from the previous section that we have learned the political ideology and economic systems are connected. And that's why when we think about the value creation of our products and services and contents that we're going to deal with throughout the semester, we need to understand these kind of systems in countries where individual goals are given primacy over collective goals, right? And we're more likely to find free market economic systems in this kind of political economy systems. And in contrast, in countries where collective goals are given preeminences, the state may have take control over many enterprises, like in North Korea or China, where markets in such countries are likely to be restricted rather than free. And how we're going to identify these kind of political economy, determines how we're going to shape our contents, how we're going to approach with our products and services to create values in these certain markets that may differ all the time. Well, that was a quite long introductory session beginning, but what I wanted to point out is that understanding political economy to link with one of the learning objectives of the second model session, which we deal with the economic system and legal systems, it's quite imperative for you guys to kind of link how one of the emphasis was to deal with the products and services and contents on the next generation, to configure the alignment of how we're going to adjust to these kind of economic systems. We can identify three broad types of economic systems, which I will be explaining in this slide, where there is market economy and command economy and a mixed economy. Okay. First of all, in a pure market economy, we call it, all productive activities are privately owned, as opposed to being owned by the state. And the goods and services, I would like to state again, the products, services, and the contents toward this generation or the next generation that a country or an individual produces are not planned by anyone. Okay? It is planned by the ownerships, a single ownership of an entrepreneur, let's say, or the companies. Production is determined by the interaction of supply and demand and signaled to producers through the price systems, we call it. And some of you who come from the backgrounds of economics or business administration would have dealt with these kind of concepts of supply and demand. It's the basics of principles of management and principles of economics. And if demand for a product exceeds supply, obviously the prices will rise, signaling producers to produce more, right? And if supply exceeds demand, prices will fall, signaling that producers to produce less. And in this system, consumers are sovereign. Okay, consumer behaviors comes to the first action, and the purchasing patterns of consumers as signal to producers through the mechanisms of the price system will determine what is produced and in what quantity. Okay, and when we think about the producers or production per se, I'm talking about all of these in a contents matter, right? And the second one would be the command economy, where in a pure command economy, also which can be called as planned economy, the government would plan the goods and the services and the contents that a country produces, the quantity in which they are produced, and the prices at which they are sold. So it's not market based, see? And consistent with the collectivist ideology that I have explained in the first model, the objective of a command economy is for the governments to allocate resources for the goods of the society here in this command economies. And all businesses are state owned, and the rationale being that the government can then direct them to make investments that are in the best interests of the nation or the country, right, as a whole, rather than in the interests of private individuals or an entrepreneurs. You know, in this type of an economic system, it would be difficult to sell or actually um, operate logistics of our goods and services or the products and services, and including the contents to configure it in the systems of economics and political regime, right? Because they are all planned out, by the country. How are we to um, expand our ideas to this kind of system and sell it out? we have to think in a different manner when we try to approach our context of the fundamentals of products and services and contents to jump into maybe North Korea, It would be very difficult and different toward the approaches of thinking about, in South Korea and the United States, right? And last but not least, the mixed economies. I would have to give you an idea that between market economies and command economies, that can be found mixed economies, right? In a mixed economy, certain sectors of the economy are left to private ownership to some degree of freedoms toward entrepreneurship and free market mechanisms to be worked in this type of economy, whereas other sectors have significant state ownership and government planning. So governments also tend to take over troubled firms if they consider to be vital to national interest. And it's kind of confusing um, toward allocating some of the resources and strategies in dealing with how the economic system would work around us. Okay? So, as we have discussed the political system and at the same time the economic system, students studying the principles of management and the next generation contents need to understand what a legal system is. The legal system of a country would refer to the rules or laws that regulate behaviors along with the processes by which the laws are enforced and through which redress for grievances obtained. So what does this mean? The legal system of a country is of immense importance to international business. Okay? A country's laws regulate business practices and define the manner in which business transactions are to be executed, and sets down the rights and obligations of those involved in business transactions. So the legal environments of countries can differ in significant ways. Okay? The differences in legal systems will affect the attractiveness of a country as an investment site or market. See? And like the economic system of a country, the legal system is influenced by the prevailing political system, as we have discussed throughout the first model. And although it is also strongly influenced by the historical tradition, the government of a country defines the legal framework within which firms actually operate its businesses and derive out its products, services, and contents. And often the laws that regulate business reflect the ruler's dominant political ideology. So we have to understand that these political, economic, and legal systems circulate each other to actually influence how the market-based, or maybe, as we have discussed, command economy or mixed economy works around us, works around the business operations to affect on our products, services, and contents to be derived in that system. Okay? And how we understand these kind of systems particularly will affect how we're going to create values with our product services and the contents we deal with, not only in the present times or in the next generation. And to simply put, you can see on the slides that I have given you, and you are pretty much familiar with these three types of legal systems, which are, first of all, common law, based on tradition, precedent, and custom. All countries have these kind of common law, right? And secondly, the civic law, which is based on detailed set of laws organized into the codes. And last but not least, theocratic law, which is based on religious teachings. And since you guys will be pretty much sure about the common law and civic law, let me just state a little further more about the theocratic law, um, where I can give you an example of the Islamic law that are mostly widely practiced, the theocratic legal system in the modern world, right? And I can give you an example of the payment or receipt of interest, which is considered usury and outlawed by the Quran. Okay, and these kind of theocratic law can be also reinforced in a legal system. Okay. All right. Let's discuss the differences in the structure of law between countries that can have important implications for the practice of products, services, and contents that we're going to handle throughout the core semester. Any entrepreneur or global companies will go through these kind of products, services, and the contents issues and try to penetrate into the international market, right? That are very different in terms of the national governing system, economic system, and legal systems. And it could be based on the contractual deal. In the terminology, the concept that we need to understand would be what is a contract and what is a contract law, right? The differences between common law and civil law systems can be illustrated by the approach of each to the contractual law, okay? And when we state a contract, it means that it is a document specifying the conditions under which an exchange of a products, services, and contents are to occur, and in details the rights and obligation of the parties, of the both sides, or maybe the manifold contractual obligators are related to it. Okay, some form of contract regulates many business transactions, and in this vein, contract law is the body of law that governs the contractual enforcement. Okay, it is the parties to an agreement normally resorts to contractual law when one party feels the other has violated either the latter or the spirit of an agreement. Okay, so these kind of contractual deals bond together in a different legal systems toward our product services and also the content. So definitively, understanding these kind of systematic operations is critical for future business leaders. So students dealing with products, services, and contents, and the principles of management and the next generation contents, we need to understand how our property rights and corruption related with these kind of issues here. And in a legal sense, the terminology property would reflect to refer to a resource over which an individual or business holders have a legal title to it. And that is a resources that any entrepreneurs or an individual or any global companies can own, right? The contents are all property rights based. And resources can include land, buildings, equipment, the capital, maybe business operations, and the intellectual properties like ideas, which can be protected by patents, copyrights, and trademarks. So these property rights would refer to the legal rights over the use to which a resource is put and over the use made of any income that may be derived from that resources. And these are case specific, right? Countries differ and their legal systems of how they deal with property rights can differ. These property rights can be violated in two ways, and one is private action, and second would be public action. Simply, private actions would refer to theft, piracy, blackmail, and the like by private individuals or groups, right? It represents a weak legal system, okay? And that means allowing for a much higher level of criminal actions in some than in others, which, for instance, if we have the product, services, and contents, the property rights, and it is violated, right, we have a less chance of creating the value. For the public action, there is a violation of property rights occurring by the public officials, maybe by politicians or government bureaucrats. See, there can be a higher level of corruption, reducing the foreign direct investment and the level of international trade, and the tendency to penetrate for an individual or global companies to go into that specific country. See how these legal systems can affect to the principles of management theories and the next generation contents issues, where I'm pretty sure as the future business leaders you would have much more thinking to do in penetrating these kind of markets, right? There are violation and corruptions toward property rights in the extent to our contents. Who would go in there? See? Well, let's look at one of the figure here, and I have prepared the rankings of corruption by countries as of 2008. I have not updated toward maybe 2019 or 2020 because nothing much has changed in terms of the rankings that deals with the corruption. And when you look at it, there is a corruption index from 0 to 10, where um, the nomination of 10 would be clean and 0 would be totally corrupt. And economic evidence suggests that high levels of corruption significantly reduces the foreign direct investment, FDI. We'll be discussing this throughout the semester later on, and the level of international trade, right? And the economic growth rate in a country. By siphoning off the profits, and corrupt politicians and bureaucrats would reduce the returns of the business investments and hence obviously reduce the incentives of both domestic and foreign businesses to invest in that country, who deals with the products, services, and contents that are related to these kind of profitability. The lower level of investment would then result to hurt the economic growth. Thus, we would expect countries such as maybe Indonesia, Nigeria, and Russia to have a much lower rate of economic growth than might otherwise have been in the case, such as Finland, New Zealand, and United Kingdom. It's transparent market, okay? Less corrupted market that are represented by these Finland, New Zealand, United Kingdom, Japan nations, okay? Somehow Japan is having some troubles here lately in regard to economic situations. But when we think about the corruption, transparency, it is better off than, some countries like Nigeria, Iraq, or Somalia. So students dealing with these products, services, and contents, and later on to represent as a future business leader, would need to understand these kind of concepts. They hurt economic growth, right? How are we going to then protect our property rights of the contents? Then comes into the question, right? So then we come to ask, oh, by the way, and this would be the last slide for the second model of the third week lecture, and I thank you for your attention. How are we to protect our intellectual properties that are closely related to our products, services, and contents that we deal with, any cases of companies or an individual of entrepreneurs? These intellectual property refers to a property that is the product of intellectual activities. Any contents related to computer software, a screenplay maybe, Korean dramas, K-pop, a music score, or any technological formula, maybe for a new drug, pharmaceutical, when we look at it in the COVID-19 pandemic situations. These patents, copyrights, and trademarks established by ownership rights can be protected using the patents, the copyrights, and the trademark system. And simply put, you can read the slides, but let me just point it out. A patent grants the inventor of a new product or process the exclusive rights for a defined period to the manufacture, use, or sale of that of an invention, right? And the copyrights are the exclusive legal rights of the authorship, the composer, playwrights, artists, and publishers to publish and disperse their work as they see fit, right? I have some of the copyrights, maybe to this lecture also, and to the papers, research ideas that I've been generating in the field of business management and in regard to some of the sports management issues as well. And the trademarks would be obviously the designs and names, often officially registered, by which merchants or manufacturers would designate and differentiate their products. See, for instance, Christian Dior clothes, Chanel, Louis Vuittons, they're all different. They have that uniqueness, creativeness, content-specific issues. They ought to be protected. They pay whole amount of intellectual properties to generate trademarks. Okay, and if you copy that, you get legal justification. You know, in the countries. Well, that would be different uh, from the national to national situations. But anyways, in the high technology as of 21st century, like right now, the knowledge economy, the intellectual property has become an increasingly important source of economic value for business, right? So I'm sustaining with a view that, you need to understand these kind of integrated governing system, economic system, and legal system differences, and how we can harm or also leverage the economic value creation of the global company business regarding our contents. So it's like a moderator, okay? It can boost up our contents to be better off with our create values, but also at the same time, when you penetrate into a different country, or some countries that does not fit or is weak, protected by the legal system, can harm your values as well. See? So thank you for the attention of the second model, and we'll see you on the third model as well.